Hey folks, Zach Osterman here. I am Insider Indianapolis Star, your Friday rundown for October 6th, 2023, the end of the bye week. It's been an eventful bye week. A few things to get through, not a ton. It is still been maybe quieter than normal, and obviously no game to talk about tomorrow. First of all, we talked earlier in the week about Indiana's decision to move on from Walt Bell, replace him with Rod Carey as offensive coordinator. We were able, forgive me, that was my 8-month-old puppy, and I don't know what he was doing. We were able to get a hold of Rod Carey's contract, or at least the memorandum of understanding, which is sort of like almost just kind of the bare bones of a contract, so that a coach can start operating, can start working under the terms of that deal, making, the compensation they're going to make, the bonuses, all the basic terms and privileges, while the fine details of the contract that'll wind up being 18, 20 pages are all hammered out. The highlights of the MOU, the biggest one is that Rod Carey is Indiana's highest paid coordinator ever. He will make $815,000 per year. That is slightly more in guaranteed annual compensation than what Kalen DeBoer made in his 1 year in Bloomington, which was right at $800,000. Carey also has a series of bonuses, not unlike DeBoer, for basically top 4 or top third, depending upon which category you're talking about, finish in the Big Ten in points per game, yards per game, red zone efficiency, rank in the Big Ten, and then also just the number of times Indiana breaks 30 points. If Indiana breaks 30 points in 60% of its games across the course of the season, Rod Carey gets an extra $100,000. If it breaks 24 points in 60% of its games across the course of a season, Carey gets an extra $50,000. If Indiana finishes in the top third of the conference in yards, points per game, or red zone efficiency across the course of the season, top third of the conference that is, Carey gets $100,000. If Indiana finishes in the top half of the conference in any of those categories, Carey gets $50,000. This is all basically really a bet. I mean, he also gets $20,000 if Indiana makes a bowl game. The rest of his sort of team achievement related bonuses kind of only restart at winning the Big Ten championship game. So beyond making a bowl game, beyond becoming bowl eligible, I should say, getting to 6 wins, his bonuses really aren't team based. They are very much offense based. They are very much structured around, essentially, if Rod Carey can put together, there's the other dog, forgive me. This is life in the home office most days. I have to pin him in here with me because God knows what kind of murder they'll cause out in the house if I'm not paying attention, especially the puppy. The gist of the contract is essentially that if Rod Carey can build a robust enough offense at Indiana, he'll be the first $1 million coordinator in IU history. If he can't, obviously, I think we can all see kind of the general direction that things are going. If Indiana wanted, his contract runs through December 31st, 2025, which is actually pretty standard right now in terms of Indiana auto-renewed several of its coaches' contracts last summer. I think 5 of its other 9 assistants have contracts running through 2025 now. And so that particular term, when we already knew that Carey's not the interim coordinator, that this was full-time, that particular term is not surprising. Indiana would owe him all remaining guaranteed compensation if it were to let him go before that date, before December 31st, 2025, unless Indiana were to make a head coaching change, at which point Indiana would owe Carey essentially that's my Outlook going off now. Indiana would owe Carey essentially I think, how is it phrased? Basically, if Indiana were to let Rod Carey go as the result of a head coaching change, it would owe him all guaranteed compensation remaining through the next June 30th. So, for example, if Indiana made a coaching change January 1, just picking that as an arbitrary date, a head coaching change, and decided that we're not going to retain Rod Carey in that event, then it would owe him basically everything he was guaranteed in base pay or guaranteed pay, which is base salary and what Indiana's contracts always call outside marketing and promotional income, through the next June 30th. So there's a bit of kind of a caveat in there for whether Indiana wanted to move on from Rod Carey as opposed to if Indiana just had whole staff turnover. There are also some provisions he would owe Indiana If he wanted to leave the contract outside 12 months remaining, so basically anytime before December 31st, 2024, he would owe Indiana 20% of remaining compensation. If he were leaving for a job not in the Big Ten, an assistant coaching job not in the Big Ten, if he were leaving for an assistant coaching job or a coordinator position in the Big Ten, he would owe 30% of remaining compensation. He wouldn't owe Indiana anything if he were leaving in the last 12 months of the deal. He also wouldn't owe Indiana anything if he were leaving for a head coaching job in college or an NFL position, an NFL assistant coaching position, or any kind of, any kind of full coaching position in the NFL. So some interesting bits in there. I think the contract length is not that surprising. The terms are not that surprising, given that we already knew he was full offensive coordinator, that he wasn't just interim. And I think there's probably a world where, he's talked at length now, Carey, about not being a miracle worker. It's not all going to happen overnight. I think there's an extent to which he would have said to Tom Allen, I need that time. I need that sort of commitment of time and whatever else. I think the other piece of it the piece of it that's most fascinating is that there is a path to him making $1 million as a coordinator, something that's never happened in Indiana. And it's actually not that, difficult of a path. Basically just be top half of the Big Ten in let's say scoring offense and total offense. And right there, you're past $900,000, be top third of the Big Ten in those two, and you're $1 million coordinator. So it is a substantial financial outlay. It's also possibly a way for Indiana to kind of talk to, just sort of almost set the market rate for that position going forward and just say, this is what we pay coordinators who we think have the opportunity to make us this good. But it's also a pretty significant bet on Rod Carey to be the fix for Indiana's offensive problems here, not just through the first 5 games of this season, but certainly stretching back, a season and a half, maybe even 2.5 seasons. So we'll have that story is at indystar.com/sports. And it kind of goes into all the different details and sort of sets more kind of, I guess, context with Carey's contract compared to Kalen DeBoer's contract. He's making more money, Carey is, than Walt Bell was making. So there's that. That's probably the biggest news from Friday. I think there's always just going to be this general recruit watch. Thank you if you've made it this deep into the video for tearing away from your Trilly Donovan Twitter notifications long enough to to talk about this a little bit here. We had a really good podcast with Jeff Borzello, my good friend from ESPN, one of ESPN's national recruiting insiders. He talked with Mind Your Banners yesterday. You can find that anywhere you get your podcasts. It's on indystar.com. You can also find it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those kinds of things. We went through basically the bigger picture of where Indiana is in recruiting, the momentum, and sort of maybe the respect that Mike Woodson's been able to build around basketball recruiting at Indiana since he got to Bloomington. And then obviously also the big three, Boogie Fland, Liam McNeely, Derek Queen, where things stand with those 3 players, where Indiana stands with those 3 players. I think it's fair to say Jeff was probably bullish on Indiana's chances of landing at least one, if not multiple of those players in the coming weeks. I think, I as much as anybody have been saying, I expected to see Boogie Fland in Bloomington again. I'm not sure that's going to happen before he commits, but there's obviously nothing stopping that from happening after he commits if Indiana would like to bring him in. McNeely and Fland seem probably closer to their decisions than Derek Queen. My assessment, I guess, of that recruitment at this point is that Queen's got his Maryland visit in 2 weeks. And I don't think there's maybe a meaningful step forward in that recruitment until then. We'll see. Houston, Maryland, Indiana, maybe LSU, all kind of in the mix for Queen. IU and Kansas for McNeely. IU and Kentucky for Fland. Some high-level recruitments, and I think fair to say some justifiable excitement for Indiana fans, because I think Indiana could well be in position to get some pretty good news from one or more 5-star players, frankly, coming down the barrel here of about the last month before the November signing window, when it does seem like I think all 3 of these guys are expected to sign in November. So I don't know that any of these recruitments are going to go past the November signing window. I think that all this will be resolved at some point next month. And obviously that's good news as well for Indiana. And the last thing that I think really kind of emerged this week was the Big Ten football schedules. If you haven't seen those, indystar.com/sports/Hoosiers, we've got Indiana's full schedules for the next 5 years in terms of Big Ten schedules. The only thing I'll really say on that, go read the story for more context. The only thing I'll really say on that is anybody who doesn't understand why Indiana was trying to get out of the Louisville series and why it wouldn't be surprising to Indiana try to get out of another, some of these other non-conference FBS series that are on the books for coming seasons. Go look at the conference schedules Indiana's got coming up. Next year, Indiana has Michigan and Ohio State. It has Washington. It has UCLA. There's a year in there where I think Indiana's got USC and Ohio State both coming to Bloomington, and it's only hosting 4 games, I believe, in that season. That's one of those years where Indiana's got 5 Big Ten road games. So the point is, Indiana knew whatever the scheduling model, and I think we call this the Flex Protect 18 model, a follow-on from the Flex Protect Plus model that I know you all loved so much, and we will never forget it, of course. Indiana knew these schedules were going to be difficult, and that is why Indiana has been angling to make its non-conference schedules as easily navigable as possible, because Indiana's just got to find a way to be as competitive as it can be in terms of reaching the bowl field, being a more consistent bowl participant, and just kind of establishing a certain pattern of success and a certain expectation of success in a conference that is only going to get more difficult. So we'll leave it there for this week. We just did 11 minutes, frankly, on a week that it felt like was a little bit quiet news-wise, especially with no football game, no Hoosier hysteria, nothing like that, no basketball media day to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. We will be back, Mike Neislick and I, if we're not back to talk on Mind Your Banners Sunday night. I'm not sure if we will be or not, since there's not a football game this weekend, but we'll certainly be back next week. Mike will be up at Big Ten Basketball Media Days, whole Big Ten Basketball Media Days in Minneapolis. We'll get his sort of reactions and observations and takeaways from that. And then obviously the Michigan game next weekend, and we are not very far from Hoosier hysteria 2 weeks from today. So thanks for watching. For the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. This has been your Friday Rundown. We'll talk to you soon.